Well, in God's amazing planning, today is Stephen Ministry Sunday, a day that we become so aware of God's power to bring hope and healing. We're highlighting this vital ministry of our church and also extending the invitation to those of you who may be feeling called by God to explore the possibility of being a Stephen minister. One of the books we use in our training of Stephen ministers was written by the founder of Stephen Ministry, Dr. Kenneth Hawk. It's called Don't Sing Songs to a Heavy Heart. And when I realized that months ago we had planned for Stephen Ministry Sunday to fall right as I was finishing a series of messages from the book of Proverbs, I immediately thought of this book, because its title comes from Proverbs. Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on soda, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. So what is this verse all about? Proverbs 25:20. Well, it invites us to consider how we relate to people who are hurting, and urges us to avoid this singing songs to heavy hearts. Now, the proverb is not telling us to avoid music around someone with a heavy heart. Music itself can be very healing. Instead, this proverb speaks about people who gloss over somebody's pain with phrases like, "I know how you feel. It's for the best." Or, "Look on the bright side." Or any sentence beginning with the words, "at least." At least you're young enough to be married again. Or, "at least she didn't suffer." Any words, any sentences beginning with these words, "at least," be careful. And then, of course, any platitude, and there are so many platitudes that we say in our best efforts, intentions to try to be helpful. Keep a stiff upper lip. There are many more fish in the sea. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. This too shall pass. God must have needed another angel. Or God doesn't give you more than you can handle. These, again, may be very well-meaning attempts for us to try to say something helpful. But as Ken Hawk reminds us in his book, though it might seem that you could lighten a heavy heart by singing songs to it, the chances are great you'll only make things worse. Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on soda is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Like one... Go back to the slide before, Josh. Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day. Well, let's look at each of these metaphors here. Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day. This image may not translate as well here in Florida, but try to imagine a really cold day. I remember when Karen and I were first married, I took her to New York City to see the Radio City Music Hall Christmas show. And Karen grew up in balmy Southern California, so this winter thing was a whole new experience for her. And I'll say the temperatures can get a lot colder in the Big Apple than they were that day, but it was below freezing. And even bundled in a thick winter coat, Karen was chilled to the bone. She looked miserable. And maybe that was part of God calling us to Florida. I don't know. But man, she was absolutely freezing to death. And now imagine if someone came up to her and took away her winter coat. Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. And Solomon offers one additional metaphor, saying that singing songs to a heavy heart is like vinegar poured on soda. Now, the word translated here as soda probably refers to a naturally occurring carbonate salt known in the ancient world as natron. And natron had many uses in Solomon's day. It was a salt scrub used to soften the skin. Imagine adding vinegar to something you're trying to soften your skin by. It was also used to make a common mouthwash. Imagine adding vinegar to your mouthwash. And natron is basically sodium carbonate, which is like baking soda. And how many of you remember the science projects where you mix vinegar with baking soda? And you get this bubbling, fizzing reaction. Well, all the different ways we can understand this mixing of substances, like vinegar poured on soda, is like one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Now, if we step back and think about this verse and these similes that Solomon offers, it's a bit strange because taking away a coat on a cold winter day is obviously harmful. And mixing vinegar and baking soda is scientifically proven to cause an unpleasant reaction. But we might think at first that singing songs to a heavy heart is at least trying to be helpful. But this proverb counterintuitively relates this truth that glossing over a person's pain may actually cause deeper hurt. So, how do we help someone who has a heavy heart? Well, Romans 12:15 reminds us, rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. And Solomon in Ecclesiastes said, there is a time to keep silence and a time to speak. You see, sometimes we think we always have to speak, and that's the way we help people. But sometimes it's that silence, that holy silence, that is so healing. Henry Nouwen expressed it so well. He said, when we honestly ask ourselves which persons in our lives mean the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving advice, solutions, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a warm and tender hand. He went on to say, the friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our powerlessness. That is a friend who cares. Now, if God is calling you to explore becoming a Stephen minister, know that even the 50 hours of training and all the continuing education will give you lots of valuable knowledge. But being a true caregiver is more about learning to live with the questions than having all the answers. Singing songs to a heavy heart, you see, does not just mean being inappropriately cheerful with others who are hurting. Singing songs may not exclusively refer to being merry. Could it also be that this warning about singing songs to heavy hearts implores us to approach any of life's challenges, complexities, or mysteries in a far deeper, more reverent way than we might be inclined to? See, the biblical way of approaching life is to resist easy answers. It's to pay attention to our own human fear and resistance. It's about being okay with the fact that we, as humans, don't need to offer solutions, and to approach every challenge with a commitment to earnest prayer and discernment, with a deep, reverent trust in the bigness of God. At the beginning of his classic book on the spiritual life called Celebration of Discipline, Richard Foster writes, superficiality is the curse of our age. The desperate need today is not for a greater number of intelligent people or gifted people, but for deep people. And then Foster goes on to say, reflecting on Psalm 42, which says, the deepness of God calls to deep. He says, perhaps somewhere in the subterranean chambers of your life, you have heard the call to deeper, fuller living. You've become weary of frothy experiences and shallow teaching. Every now and then you have caught glimpses, hints of something more than you have known. Inwardly, you long to launch out into the deep. So many people today are hurting, trying to survive in a fearful, angry world, dealing with guilt, facing economic uncertainties, grieving broken relationships, dealing with all sorts of physical, mental, and emotional pain. Today, our church is hurting. We face an unexpected challenge, and there's bound to be shock and sorrow and fear. At times like this, God raises up people who are willing to go deep, who will bear one another's burdens, who will not offer easy answers or cast blame or avoid dealing with the painful realities of a broken world. At times like this, God will always raise up people who will face their own darkness, who will reach out to those who hurt, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not fixing, who in the midst of storms can truly be still and know that God is God. Whether or not we are called to be Stephen ministers, we are all called to be ministers like Stephen. The New Testament disciple for whom this ministry is named appears in only 2 chapters in the book of Acts. We know that Stephen was a man with a servant's heart. He was one of the first disciples of the church, first deacons of the church. Stephen was a man of deep faith and courage, and he became the first Christian martyr. And as he faced his accusers, the Bible says that Stephen had a countenance like the face of an angel. Not a feigned facade, or a sappy smile, or a look of solemn self-righteousness. It was more a calm serenity. Maybe like the face of Moses when he came down from the mountain after having been with the Lord. That glow that the Bible describes was on Moses' face. I think that may be what is being described here with Stephen in his moment of trial. Such a countenance can be seen in those who are close to God and reflect some of His glory as a result of being in God's presence. What we're talking about here is a faith that goes way beyond surface-level religion. We're talking about a quality of life that is accessible to every one of us. It's faith that's able to trace the goodness of the Lord in the midst of chaos and turbulence. It's faith that recognizes that in a broken and fearful world, strength and serenity are found not by trying to manage a stress-free life, but it's found in our vigorous and dedicated pursuit of God, or more accurately, in responding to God's pursuit of us. Again, we may not all be called to be Stephen ministers, but all of us are called to be ministers like Stephen. Ordinary people who will display an extraordinary spirit because our Christian faith does not skim the surface, but dives deep into the well of God's love and knows that although God is mysterious, God is never absent. And as our faith matures and deepens, we can appreciate that a time of struggle can actually be the most important and meaningful time of our lives. This kind of faith perspective is such a gift to others and a gift to the world. You know, the most powerful ministry of the church is not done and has never been done by pastors. The real power of the Christian faith, what makes any church truly special, is the witness of ordinary people who walk closely with God, and through that growing relationship with the Lord, share a deep, authentic faith in a God who is always working to bring healing and transformation. I think Ken Hawk says it so well in his book. He reminds us that we're all looking forward to the return of Jesus, that time when all the tears will be wiped away. But he says, the church's unique mission belongs to the transitional period between the beginning of the new creation at the first Easter and its final completion at the end of time. And he says, Christians are Easter people. But very often, the world looks less like Easter and more like Good Friday. Rather than resurrection or rebirth, hurting people may be experiencing the darkness of a personal Golgotha. As those who are suffering face their darkest hours, you can be the means through which God begins to wipe away their tears. And he reminds us the community of believers, the church, is called to be Christ's Easter body in a Good Friday world. And a Good Friday world does not need people who simply sing songs to heavy hearts. A Good Friday world needs people of real, authentic faith, who even in the face of darkness, despair, and death, reflect the serenity of trusting that in ways we cannot explain or understand, God is at work.